Have you ever imagined opening a pantry stocked with food you preserved yourself, finding everything still perfectly safe after years on the shelf?
That is not a fantasy. That is exactly what Amish families across rural Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana do every single winter without fail.
They store fermented sauerkraut, cured meats, pickled eggs, kefir, aged cheese, and dozens of other perishable foods for months and years at a time.
And they do all of this without a single refrigerator, without electricity, and without a single synthetic preservative added to any of their food.
What makes this possible is a combination of ancient techniques backed by real science that the modern food industry quietly forgot or chose to ignore. Fermentation is at the heart of everything, a biological process where beneficial bacteria transform food into something that can naturally resist time. The result is living food packed with probiotics, bioactive peptides, vitamins, and short-chain fatty acids that actively support your health daily.
Probiotics are live beneficial microorganisms that populate your gut microbiome and influence everything from immunity to digestion to mental well-being.
The Amish live in communities that rarely rely on conventional medicine, and fermented foods are central to how they maintain health across generations. They do not need a pharmacy because their pantry, root cellar, and deep knowledge of fermentation have been doing the work for centuries already. Free from artificial dyes, synthetic emulsifiers, and chemical preservatives, their food is biologically alive in a way industrial products never are. Today we go deep into exactly how the Amish store fermented foods for the long term, and why the science behind every one of these methods works. By the end, you will understand not just the tradition, but the biology and practical wisdom that makes Amish preservation so remarkably effective.
This system has been tested not in a laboratory, but in real life, across real winters, feeding real families without a single backup plan or safety net. The Amish do not talk about food security as an abstract concept because they live it completely, season after season, without modern infrastructure support.
The science of fermentation as preservation begins with lactic acid bacteria, microorganisms present naturally on vegetable surfaces and in raw milk. These bacteria consume the sugars in food and convert them into lactic acid, which drops the pH of the environment significantly as fermentation goes. Research published in Foods confirmed that lactic acid bacteria produce lactic acid, organic acids, and bacteriocins with strong antimicrobial activity. Bacteriocins are natural protein compounds produced by LAB that can inhibit or kill harmful bacteria, including Listeria, Salmonella, and Staphylococcus. As the pH drops below 4 during fermentation, the environment becomes hostile to spoilage organisms and pathogens that cannot survive that acidity.
This is not folk wisdom, it is a well-documented biological mechanism that food scientists have been studying and confirming for well over a century.
The Amish apply this knowledge through practice rather than theory, but the biological outcome is identical to what controlled lab fermentation achieves.
The pH of properly fermented sauerkraut drops to between 3 and 4 within the first few days, creating conditions that most pathogens cannot survive.
Lactic acid produced during fermentation also inhibits mold and certain mycotoxins, according to published research in food microbiology journals from 2022. The longer a fermented food sits in a cool cellar, the more complex its microbial profile becomes, with greater diversity of beneficial organisms developing. A single batch of properly fermented sauerkraut can maintain food safety and probiotic content for 2 to 3 years in the right storage conditions. The root cellar is the single most important structure on any Amish farm, and understanding why requires grasping how the earth itself behaves. Soil is a poor conductor of heat, meaning that at 6 to 12 feet underground, the temperature remains remarkably stable throughout the whole year. At a depth of just 6 feet, soil temperature in most of North America stays between 40 and 55 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the entire year. Agricultural science confirms that underground cellars maintain temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round with no electricity.
The ideal humidity for a root cellar sits between 85 and 95%, and underground soil provides that moisture through passive evaporation.
These two conditions, stable cool temperature and high humidity, slow microbial activity and enzymatic decay in stored produce to a fraction of normal.
The Amish build their root cellars into hillsides or dig them below barns, letting the earth provide insulation and natural moisture regulation freely.
The Amish build their cellars with stone or packed earth walls, both materials that absorb heat slowly and release it even more slowly through the seasons. A well-built Amish root cellar can hold these conditions for decades with no maintenance beyond occasional checks of ventilation and humidity each season.
Some Amish families use stream water channeled beneath their storage spaces, achieving consistent cool temperatures without any mechanical system at all.
Ventilation is a critical detail managed through carefully placed openings that allow air exchange without shifting temperature or humidity levels sharply. Ethylene gas released by certain produce like apples can accelerate ripening of neighboring foods, so experienced Amish farmers separate them carefully.
A glass jar is one of the most important tools in the Amish preservation system, chosen because glass is chemically inert with acidic fermented food. The choice of glass over plastic is not just cultural preference, it is a scientifically sound decision that protects the biological integrity of the food. Glass has been shown in research to be the most neutral container for fermented and acidic foods because it neither absorbs nor releases any compounds.
Research confirms that glass containers prevent the leaching of synthetic chemicals into food, a documented problem with certain plastic containers over time. An Amish cellar with rows of sealed glass jars is in many ways a more reliable long-term food preservation system than a modern household freezer.
When fermented sauerkraut is sealed in a glass jar and stored in a cool cellar, the combination of acidity and low temperature creates multiple protections.
The airtight seal prevents oxygen from entering the jar, which is critical because many spoilage organisms and mold species require oxygen to multiply. Anaerobic fermentation inside a sealed glass jar continues slowly over time, gradually deepening the probiotic content and acidity as months pass by. Some Amish families use wax or lard as an additional seal over jar lids, creating a second barrier against oxygen and external microbial contamination. Sea salt is the foundational tool of Amish fermentation, and its role in preservation goes far beyond simply adding flavor to the finished product.
When salt is added to vegetables at around 2% of their weight, it creates osmotic pressure that draws water out of the plant cells naturally. This osmotic pressure generates the brine liquid that fermentation bacteria need to begin working, and it happens without any additional water being added.
Salt suppresses most harmful bacteria that cannot tolerate high sodium, while lactic acid bacteria are specifically salt tolerant and keep thriving well. This selective pressure is what makes salt such a remarkable biological tool. It filters the microbial environment. The Amish use unrefined sea salt or natural rock salt with no anti-caking agents, no flow additives, and no chemical treatments that could interfere. The 2% salt rule used by Amish fermenters matches what food scientists recommend as the minimum effective concentration for safe lactofermentation.
Salt also moderates the growth of lactic acid bacteria slightly, and a slow controlled fermentation produces a more stable and nutritionally complex result.
Research on lactic acid fermentation confirms that correct salt concentration is one of the most important factors in achieving safe fermentation outcomes. Too little salt and unwanted bacteria multiply before the lactic acid bacteria can drop the pH enough to create a safe environment for the food.
Smoking is one of the most elegant preservation methods the Amish use for meat, working through several distinct scientific mechanisms simultaneously. Wood smoke from oak, hickory, and applewood contains phenolic compounds, including guaiacol and syringol, which have well-documented antimicrobial properties.
These phenolic compounds penetrate the outer surface of the meat and form a protective chemical layer that inhibits bacteria, molds, and oxidation.
Salt curing before smoking draws moisture from muscle tissue through osmosis, reducing water activity to a level where most pathogens cannot multiply. Water activity measures available moisture in food, and when it drops below a critical threshold, harmful microorganisms simply cannot grow in the food.
The smokehouse is one of the oldest deliberately built preservation structures in human history, and the Amish maintain this tradition with genuine precision.
Cold smoking at temperatures below 80 degrees Fahrenheit preserves meat proteins without cooking them, letting smoke compounds penetrate the surface deeply.
The combination of salt and smoke means the meat has multiple independent biological defense systems operating at the same time throughout the whole surface.
The combination of salt curing, cold smoking, and hanging in dry, ventilated space achieves a water activity reduction that preserves Amish ham for years.
This is the same science behind traditional cured meats like prosciutto and serrano ham, foods preserved by identical biological mechanisms for centuries.
When cooked meat is submerged in solidified lard inside a sealed glass jar, the fat creates a complete oxygen barrier around the food beneath it.
Without oxygen, aerobic spoilage bacteria and mold species cannot grow, and the fat itself does not provide nutrients for anaerobic spoilage organisms.
The confit method was standard practice in French farmhouses, Roman households, and Native American communities long before modern refrigeration ever existed.
Fat-preserved foods sealed in glass last many months without spoilage as long as the fat stays solid, the jar stays sealed, and heat is avoided.
This method, known historically as confit, was used across Europe and the Americas before refrigeration, and the Amish continue practicing it reliably today.
Pure rendered lard is naturally shelf-stable because of its very low water content and natural antioxidants that slow the oxidative rancidity process. Amish lard from pigs raised in sunlight is a meaningful source of vitamin D and contains monounsaturated fatty acids similar in profile to olive oil.
Herbs like thyme, rosemary, and lavender stored in lard retain their bioactive essential oils far longer than dried herbs kept in open-air containers.
Water bath canning is a major preservation pillar in the Amish kitchen, used for high-acid foods like fermented tomatoes, fruit preserves, and pickles.
The process places sealed glass jars of food into boiling water for a set time, eliminating remaining spoilage organisms and creating a vacuum seal.
The vacuum seal created during water bath canning is audible when the lid clicks inward as the jar cools, and that sound tells an Amish cook the jar is safe.
A properly sealed water bath jar will have a concave lid that resists pressure when pushed, which is the physical sign the vacuum seal is intact and secure.
This method, combined with the natural acidity of fermented food, gives finished jars a shelf life extending from 1 to 3 years in proper cellar conditions.
Drying is among the oldest preservation methods in human history, and the Amish use it extensively for herbs, beans, fruits, and farm-grown vegetables. The preservation principle is simple. Removing water reduces food's water activity to the point where bacteria, molds, and yeasts cannot grow at all.
Dried herbs retain their essential oils and medicinal compounds in concentrated form, making them more potent per amount than fresh herbs right after harvest.
The Amish dry vegetables in open air, in cloth-covered wooden frames, or in warm attic spaces where good airflow prevents mold from forming during drying.
The Amish hang braided garlic and onion bundles in cool, dry spaces where they remain shelf-stable and flavorful for 6 months or longer without treatment.
Dried meat in the form of jerky has water activity low enough to resist bacterial growth, and Amish families have made salt-dried strips for many generations.
Dried beans can be stored for years in cloth bags or glass jars in a cool, dry cellar, providing reliable plant protein through the harshest winters. When combined with fermentation, some Amish families partially dry vegetables before packing them in brine, achieving denser texture and concentrated flavor.
The Amish approach to health is rooted in prevention rather than treatment, and their fermented food traditions are central to maintaining that well-being. Sauerkraut provides vitamin C, vitamin K, and live probiotics for immunity, and the Amish used it through winters long before vitamin C was isolated.
The raw apple cider vinegar Amish families make contains acetic acid, enzymes, and the living vinegar mother that pasteurized store versions completely lack.
Fermented apple cider vinegar with its living mother culture is used as a daily tonic, and research suggests it may support healthy blood sugar balance.
Kefir provides complete proteins, calcium, B vitamins, and dozens of probiotic strains that science links to better immunity, mood, and digestion today. Fermented honey with garlic combines hydrogen peroxide in honey with allicin in garlic, two of the most studied natural antimicrobial compounds available.
Beet kvass provides betalain antioxidants and probiotics in a liquid form traditionally used to support liver and digestive health through the winter. Aged Amish cheeses develop vitamin K2 during aging, a nutrient that helps direct calcium toward bone tissue and away from arterial walls in the human body.
The industrial food system has spent decades replicating the appeal of fermented foods while removing the one thing that makes them valuable: living organisms.
Pasteurized sauerkraut on a supermarket shelf has been heat-treated to eliminate all living bacteria, leaving fiber and some vitamins but zero probiotics.
Commercial vinegar pickles use distilled acetic acid to create acidity without fermentation, meaning the beneficial bacteria were never part of the process.
Industrial preservation relies on sodium benzoate, potassium sorbate, and dozens of other synthetic compounds that provide no nutritional value to the body. A review in Trends in Food Science noted that the complexity of traditionally fermented foods cannot be replicated by adding individual compounds back in.
The biological diversity of a living fermented food with hundreds of microbial strains is simply beyond what industrial chemistry can produce or package.
A food made with salt, thyme, and biology is fundamentally different from one made with chemistry, heat, and synthetic stabilizers inside a factory setting.
When you eat an industrial pickle, you get acidity and crunch, but none of the enzymatic activity, bacteriocins, or probiotic organisms of real fermentation.
The Amish do not learn food preservation from textbooks. They learn it by working beside parents and grandparents from childhood in a living oral tradition.
This knowledge passes through practice and observation, through the feel of properly massaged cabbage releasing brine and the smell of correct fermentation.
An Amish elder can judge a fermentation batch by its aroma, its color, its texture, and the sound of gas escaping when a jar lid is gently pressed. This sensory expertise, built over a lifetime, is biological knowledge that no label, no certificate, and no...
Passing down sourdough starters, kefir grains, and vinegar mothers within families means some Amish cultures are literally generations old and still alive.
Each living culture passed to the next generation carries its own unique microbial profile shaped by the specific farm, local water, and regional climate.
Modern food science has spent decades studying traditional fermentation and preservation methods, and findings consistently validate what the Amish have done.
A 2022 study published in Foods confirmed that lactic acid bacteria produce bacteriocins capable of bacteria. Research from Michigan State University confirms that underground cellars at 6 to 12 feet depth stay between 32 and 50 degrees year-round.
Studies on water activity confirm that properly salt-cured meats remain microbiologically stable for extended periods without any refrigeration being needed.
Intech Open research from 2025 confirmed that lactic acid bacteria synthesize riboflavin and exopolysaccharides that enhance both nutrition and preservation.
Science keeps confirming these methods are not primitive but sophisticated biological systems that modern technology is still working hard to match.
The Amish way of storing fermented foods is not a single trick, it is a complete system where each element reinforces every other element in the chain.
Fermentation creates the acidity, salt creates selective pressure, the root cellar provides temperature, glass provides containment, and time does the rest.
Every jar on an Amish cellar shelf is the result of this complete system working together, and removing any element undermines the whole approach's integrity. The profound thing about this system is that it needs no external inputs beyond what the farm, the local soil, and the biological world naturally provide.
No electricity, no synthetic chemicals, no industrial machinery, and no refrigerants are needed for any step of this preservation process at any point. What the Amish prove every year is that food security and biological preservation wisdom can coexist without a single industrial product being involved.
The Amish have never needed a marketing campaign because their health outcomes, their community longevity, and the contents of their cellars speak clearly.
Every season the harvest goes in, the fermentation begins, the jars fill the cellar, and the cycle sustaining these communities for generations continues on. Modern research is confirming what these communities have demonstrated through practice, that living food preserved naturally is nutritionally superior overall.
Adding even one of these methods to your own kitchen is a step toward a more self-sufficient relationship with food, and the science supports that step.
Always consult a healthcare professional before major dietary changes, especially if you have any health condition that requires regular monitoring. Leave a comment below telling us which Amish storage method surprised you most, and your perspective might help someone else discover something truly new today.